Right now with the Rolex situation, a lot of people are a bit bummed, and I can absolutely understand that. Especially when you are newer to this watch hobby, you might find yourself at some sort of a dead end with the wait lists and all that. So now today in this video, I want to show you great options or alternatives to 5 of the most iconic Rolex models that are also more affordable too. Okie dokie, let's start out with the Rolex Day-Date. Obviously a total Rolex classic and dubbed as the watch for presidents. As it is made from precious metals only, more affordable alternatives to it are mostly made from steel or, in a two-tone configuration. There are plenty of Day-Date complication watches out there, so for this section I want to show you those who manage to capture the elegance and grace of a Day-Date instead of just housing the same complication. But before we get into the first watch of today, it is time to pay the bills and thank today's sponsor, Chronext. Chronext is an international online pre-owned watch retailer with over 32 brands and 800 models, providing pickup locations and lounges all over the world for you. And if you want, you can use promo code Jenny when purchasing from Chronext to get an extra discount. And just for transparency, there is no financial kickback from me, but you will get to save money on your next Chronext purchase. And so we are starting out with the Hamilton Jazzmaster Day-Date Auto. It comes in a 40mm stainless steel case with a matching steel bracelet. The sunburst on this matches the sunburst on a Rolex Day-Date, and if you want to stay in theme with it, I would recommend going for the monochrome look on the Hamilton. The H40 caliber from Hamilton is based on an ETA 2834-2 with an 80-hour power reserve, so you will find plenty of watchmakers who are able to service it should you need it to be serviced. Though it does have a large case, the well-proportioned lines make it work really well. It would definitely be a great choice for all of you out there who love a Day-Date but cannot stand the Cyclops lens. And depending on where you are in the world, it goes for about $855 on a steel bracelet. Tudor is a great source to look for watches that share a good amount of the same design DNA, though these two brands still very much have a look of their own to them. And so for about $4,000 you can get a Tudor Glamour Date and Day with a 39mm case diameter to get a bit closer to the classic 36mm diameter of a Day-Date. The two-tone variation of the Glamour has the most Day-Date feel, and it's the Tudor Calibre T603, which is also based on an ETA movement with a power reserve of 38 hours. It also has a very interesting looking bracelet with the Tudor classic, the little ceramic pin snaps, which makes opening and closing the clasp really fun. And has a little extra I want to throw in: a vintage Mido Commander Day-Date. Current models also have a day and date complication, but they do look very different to the vintage variation of this watch from the 80s. They have become really difficult to find, but every now and then an offer just pops up and they go for everything in between, I would say like $400 and $900. With its machine turned bezel and flat case, it really delivers the goods and has the same vibe as a vintage Day-Date, which is great. Next up, we are going to look at other options for the Rolex Daytona. We are going for the Pendadal configuration, though there are obviously a lot more than that, but I would say that this is the most iconic dial. So we are looking for a no fluff, non-haute horlogerie chronograph in black and white and full steel. Probably one of the most obvious choices, but nevertheless a really great one in my opinion. The newly released Tudor Black Bay Chrono, going for about $5,700. It houses the Tudor MT5813 in-house caliber with a COSC certification. Measuring 41mm makes it definitely larger compared to a Daytona, as well as thicker, which comes from the quite thick in-house movements that Tudor produces. The bezel on this one is made from anodized aluminium, so it feels a bit more like an older Daytona, so I would say that the dial design also adds to that feeling. The minute tracks and the overall layout look much more like a 1980s watch than a 2080s, I would say. Overall, it is not only a great alternative to a Daytona, but also perhaps even a better choice for those with large wrists, as the Daytona looks and sits rather small on wrists. And I mean, come on, that's another no-brainer. The Zenith Chronomaster Sport, again a larger case with a 41mm, but with the iconic El Primero 3600 movement, which lets you measure the time up to the 10th of a second, and with a power reserve of 60 hours, so you will get a more accurate timing with this one than with most other watches out there. With the Zenith, you also get a ceramic bezel insert, as well as the colored subdials, which gives the Chronomaster a very distinct and unique look. I really like it because though I would still consider it very much a panda looking dial. It gives it its own spin and it makes it feel, you know, like less rigid in terms of design. But the best thing and the highlight would definitely be the exhibition case back that lets you take a look at the El Primero movement. You know, it would be pretty cool if there was an option like a reverser to just flip the dial around and you could just wear it upside down. I would totally do that. You can get all that for about 10,000 US dollars on a steel bracelet. Right, next up we are having a look at the Datejust options. An alternative to a Datejust should ideally carry the same casual elegance and with just a slight hint of extravagance to capture the essence of a Datejust, as there are quite a few, you know, sometimes very different looking Datejust variations, like you've got a fluted bezel or a domed bezel, or you've got the different bracelet options and dial colors. We will be able to find quite a few very fitting alternatives to the Datejust, so let's have a look at them. I have already reviewed this one and I think it makes a great alternative to a Datejust, the Tissot Powermatic 80. If you want to watch the video later, you can click on the link in the description box down below. It measures 40mm in diameter but has a comparably tame lug to lug of 48mm and works great if you are looking for a slightly increased wrist presence with the same aesthetics as a classic blue dial Datejust. It does add a couple of extras like a framed date or the butterfly clasp, and I have to say that what really makes this work is definitely the feel of it. It's priced at below just $1,000 and it feels much more expensive, which I think is great, even though it really wears a lot larger given the classic Datejust size would be a 36mm. It's definitely more casual than elegant, but you know, you can always add a nice leather strap, which drastically changes the look in my opinion. So option number 2 might be perhaps a bit of a controversial suggestion, but something I would suggest nonetheless. Available in different sizes, the Royal captures the extravagance many Datejust configurations have. You can choose between Roman numerals or even diamond hour markers, and the integrated bracelet in combination with the case give off a very, you know, fluted bezel / jubilee vibe. A standard 38mm costs around €2,690 with the ETA-based caliber T601 and a power reserve of about 38 hours. And given that the case design is, you know, rather out there and quite long, I would recommend considering a size a tad bit smaller than what you would usually go for to keep it looking as dressy and casual as a Datejust. Alrighty, let's have a look at the one Rolex I've probably seen the most on wrists all around the world, the Submariner, and more specifically we're going for the Submariner Date. Therefore we need to be looking for divers with a substantial case size, a well-made bracelet, preferably a bezel with a ceramic inlay, and a date to make it nice and handy. Since the Submariner has been worn as an everyday watch for decades now, it would also be good that the alternatives would have the same everyday feel and durability as this one. And right out of the gate, we're going to start with Omega's Golden Boy and everyone's favorite. I've mentioned it in quite a lot of videos of mine, and rightfully so, the Omega Seamaster Diver 300M. It feels fantastic as it is very detailed with a super sharp finishing, but it never feels delicate. It is robust and wears comfortable, and you could also get it on an Omega rubber strap if that's what you like. And it has a date of 6 o'clock and a ceramic bezel inlay to go with it. The only thing I could see some be bothered by is the fact that there's not a clear sunburst, but this very intricate wavy pattern. I mean, I really like it, but I could see how that might be hit or miss for some people. Though there is no iconic green option to resemble Hulk, you could get plenty of other colors, a black and blue, but I have to say the favorite one has to be the white dial, which costs about $6,000 on a steel bracelet. And I cannot make this list without this one. It's the latest iteration of the very popular Oris Aquis Date, the Oris Aquis Date Calibre 400. It's a 41mm in stainless steel and it costs about $3,500. And thanks to the new Calibre 400 has a power reserve of 5 days, which is also indicated on the dial. The bracelet has an extension, which is always great. And then there's also the sunburst, which so many love on a Rolex too. My favorite part is definitely the exhibition case bag with the teddy bear movement, which is, you know, meant to represent the Oris bear. And I think what makes this one a great alternative is the combination of the details like the polished middle links or the sunburst, as it really manages to bridge the same gap between elegant yet robust and sporty, just like the Submariner. And you know, I would probably get also crucified if I wouldn't mention a Seiko in this category, so I think a great choice would be this. a classic blue dial Seiko 5 Sports SRPD51 with the top of the case brushed, sides polished and brushed bracelet, and a Seiko 5 typical crown at 4. Though this one has a day and a date, it's positioned at 3 o'clock, same as the Submariner date, so I think the feeling still is very similar. I know that the 42.5mm diameter sounds rather large, but the case wears okay and would work on smaller wrists too. Inside beats the automatic Seiko movement 4R36, or better known as the NH36, which might ring a bell if you have watched my previous video on Amazon watches with a water resistance of 100 meter. And before you comment down below that this is blasphemous, you know, having a diver with only 100 meter water resistance, I would like to add that I'm sure most people won't take their Submariner deep diving either, so I think it still leaves you with plenty of enough of a water resistance to go with. It costs about $200 depending on where you buy it from and where you live in the world. Has a nice presence on the wrist, and I really like that it transitions into more elegant situations just as nicely as a Submariner date would do. The GMT-Master II is pretty iconic, and the Pepsi bezel has become such a symbol for the GMT watch. So for an alternative, we are ideally looking for a two-tone bezel insert and a GMT watch with an added date complication to get the full package. A full steel bracelet would be a win too, and it would need to keep the balance between charmingly vintage and modern elegance, and a case of about 40mm would be great. And you know, Tudor is back at it again, presenting us with a great alternative and a very down-to-earth approach to a GMT watch that employs the same color scheme as the most iconic GMT, the Tudor Black Bay GMT. You get the Pepsi colored bezel, but this time it's not ceramic but aluminium as an inlay. The Tudor Movement MT5652 has a 70-hour power reserve and a dual time zone function and a date display. That's nice. The red second time zone hand looks really great, and the overall brushed look of the case and bracelet makes this one a bit more tool-ish looking compared to the Rolex GMT-Master. And as I've mentioned, Tudor's in-house movements tend to be a bit thicker, so this one also sits a bit higher on the wrist and has a diameter of 41mm, which makes it, I would say, more suited for bigger wrists. It would definitely work on smaller wrists too, but you know, it would kind of take away the bit of elegance, so keep that in mind. Depending on where you are in the world, it would cost you about $4,500. And I know for this option, it doesn't have the iconic Pepsi colorway, but we still get two colors, get a dark and a light blue. But I had to include this because it's simply one of the most beautiful GMT watches I know, the Grand Seiko SPGE 255. The light blue GMT hand adds just the right amount of color to the dial, which the rest of remains in a very classic dark blue. The date display sits at 4, and you also get the power reserve indicator at 9, which some might find is an eyesore, but I guess it's up to personal preference. On top of it all, you can enjoy a spring drive movement to go with your GMT, so you can get hypnotized by the sweep of the seconds hand, and if that's not convincing, I don't know what is. I mean, you also get a close to perfection type of finishing, and all that for about $5,200, which is a little bit more than half of the price of a GMT-Master II right now. And lastly, which is sort of a bit of a bonus watch, I want to say, I like to throw in the Timex Q ReIssue from about 2 years ago. This one is relatively affordable, going for just below, I want to say right now, $200 depending on where you are shopping. You would be able to get this in the Pepsi bezel, but also black and blue version is available. The Q ReIssue takes on the vintage side of the GMT watch and is definitely a fun watch to wear, and it gives me very much Tommy Vercetti from GTA Vice City vibes. I can totally picture him with his, you know, with that shirt and just cruising around Vice City and wearing this watch. I don't know. So yeah, the rest with the very fine links, they look really cool, but might snag some hairs from time to time, so be aware of that. You do get a day and a date, but unfortunately there's no GMT hand, so you would have to use the bezel to set the second time zone. And I think, all things considered, this makes for a great GMT looking watch that is really fun to wear, especially if you're into, you know, the vintage designs and a bit of a, I want to say, a bit of a cheesy side to watches too. So here you have it, lots of great options or alternatives, however you like to call them, to the top 5 most iconic Rolex watches out there. There are definitely plenty of other really amazing watches out there with the same type of complications and a very similar design that just wait to be discovered by you. So let me suggest that you go out there and find them. And I know that we can sometimes really fixate on certain watches, but I would say that it is definitely worth looking at what else is around. And I'm sure a lot of people watching this right now are going to have plenty of other suggestions or watch recommendations, so please go ahead and leave them in the comments down below. And that was it for today's video. A big thank you again to today's sponsor, Chronext, and if you have enjoyed this video, you can give it a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!